Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Welcome back to the Get Published podcast. My name is Paul Brodie, and I am proud to serve as your host. And today we have another amazing guest with probably one of the best intros I have ever read. So Qat Wanders is a former circus performer turned author and self-made businesswoman with a wee bit of a unicorn obsession. She has edited more than 4,000 books and ghostwritten over 100, including New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestsellers. Her extensive experience in the world of self-publishing and editing spans more than a decade and means she is uniquely placed to help authors achieve their dreams of publication and get their messages out into the world. In addition, she is a single mom, competitive weightlifter, avid reader, and skydiver who recently completed her first main jump in quite a while. So Qat, welcome to the Get Published podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a long intro. I'm going to have to work on that.
Well, Qat, we are thrilled to have you. Are you ready to begin?
Sure thing.
All right, let's get to it. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Just follow through and don't rush the process. But the main thing is follow through, because most people start that book and then never finish. But the other thing I see is people who just hurry through the process and then they put out a crap book. And honestly, I was kind of one of those people. My first book was just definitely subpar, and I went back and fixed it later, but I can't change the fact that I put out a subpar book first. So follow through, but don't rush.
Got it. And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published? And I love this question to ask you because you're an editor. So what is that hardest part about getting published, Qat?
Following through is it's just because I'm an editor and I've seen so many hundreds and hundreds of authors go through this process. Honestly, a high percentage of them do actually publish, but not enough. Like, they get so far, especially because by the time they get to me, they've already written the book. Now they just have to get through editing. And a lot of people do panic at the editing point because they realize just because they wrote a rough draft doesn't actually mean they wrote a book. And it gets hard and they get discouraged. So it's just keep going and follow through.
Well, let's talk about the editing process. So you being an author, you being an editor, and obviously I know editing's one of your big areas right now. But tell us more about that process and what it entails. Because editing, that's the one thing I hate the most, especially being a publisher, the editing, the proofreading. It really is tough. People ask me, what do you think is the hardest part of it? And I said, editing, getting the book done. So tell us a bit more about that process and then your process as well with your company.
An author and an editor meet and they run toward each other in slow motion in a field of wildflowers. But no, it's a process, and a lot of authors hire a really bad editor, but also a lot of editors have worked with a lot of really bad writers. So, there's give and take. So it's a matter of finding who's a good fit. Just because an editor is a good editor doesn't mean they're the best editor for you. So do your homework first, talk to people who have worked with that editor and see how their experience was. Or maybe the editor is a good fit for your book, but your personalities aren't a good match. I've had that happen with clients where I've fired a client and I had a client just drop me because she didn't understand my feedback. We had communication problems. So there's all sorts of things that can just not work. And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with either one of you. It just doesn't work, and that's okay. So just give yourself some cushion to find the right person. And it's possible, and it's very possible that first person might not be the right person. You might have to get rid of that editor when they're working on the book. So just make sure you're looking at the contract, figure out what you're getting involved in. But yeah, know that if you're doing multiple rounds, you might do one round with that editor and decide that they're not a good fit, or that they were a good fit for that round, but now you need to go on to copy editing with someone else. That's actually why I've changed my system. Instead of doing full-blown packages like I used to, I actually charge per round of edits now, just in case I or the author decides that we don't want to continue the relationship after one round. So I've also gotten a lot pickier with the books I edit nowadays. So yeah, I don't have time to take on every project that I get. So so that's like, yeah, really doing your homework in finding an editor, because the relationship is going to be important. And if you find someone you work really well with, hold on to that editor. I can't remember who said it, but there was a quote like, if you find the right editor, hold on to them, marry them if you must. And just don't let them go, because if they understand your voice really well, that's really hard to find. So hold on. And the other part of your question was working with like me specifically. Yeah. And my company.
More about your process. I know you've talked about rounds, but tell us a bit more about that, because I think you know the next question. We're going to take a little deeper dive into this. I'm going to ask you that same question I asked you during the Get Published Summit about the different types. And then just doing a little bit of a breakdown with that.
Yeah. So, well, actually, I'm going to kind of flip-flop those, because I know you're going to ask me what are the different rounds of editing. And then that actually ties into my process, because you'd think that as editors who are so detail-oriented, we would be able to agree on what's what, but we can't. So depending on the editor you talk to, get really clear on how they define each of these types of editing. So what some editors will call developmental editing, others call it content editing. What I call content editing, some people call developmental. What I call copy editing, some people call content editing. So and what I call line editing, some people call content editing. You just don't know what you're getting. So, but ideally, and in traditional publishing, this is accurate because that's where I have my background. You have 4 rounds. You have, and I'm just going to call them what I was trained to call them, and then I'll explain what they are. We have developmental, content, copy, and proofing. So the developmental round is just the big picture. You're looking for plot holes, things that don't make sense. Did you kill a character in chapter 2 and then they're having tea in chapter 7? Or do you have a nonfiction book where you just introduced a brand new concept in chapter 2 that you didn't explain until chapter 5? That all gets handled in developmental editing, because the editor is going to go through it, leave notes, usually in the margins. There aren't going to be like commas or word changes or things like that. It's going to be big picture, full structure of the book, saying, hey, maybe you need to combine chapter 3 and 4, or maybe you need to move chapter 9 and make it chapter 1. Or, hey, you forgot to write a conclusion, that type of stuff. So that's usually where I lose people. When they come to me for developmental editing, I'd say almost half the time they don't come back again, because they get discouraged. They see, oh, I actually have to pretty much rewrite the whole book. And then they don't come back because they get discouraged. Rarely, usually with more experienced authors, that pretty much never happens with a first-time author. They always have to rewrite the book. But with experienced authors, they won't need very many changes. The structure is good. Content editing is, rather than big picture, you have like little picture. So it's making sure the whole book flows. Does this scene make sense right here? Does the scene open well? Does this paragraph work here? And it moves. So instead of the structure of the whole book, it's like the structure of each scene and each page and each paragraph. Making sure everything flows smoothly into the next thing. You'll see a lot of sometimes rewriting. If the editor is really heavy-handed, they might rewrite stuff. I personally don't do that. I will highlight and say, because it needs to be in your voice. Like, I recommend going more into detail about this topic right here because you said this over here and you didn't really explain it. Or a lot of times it's cutting down. Like, this can be cut down to 1 paragraph. You don't need 7. That's content editing. The next round is copy editing, pretty much smoothing out the grammar and the syntax, making sure the words make sense, that you're using that versus which properly, spelling, all the little details, making it readable. Copy editing is what most people think editors do. Like, a lot of people seem to think that that's all they're hiring the editor for. Like, oh, you fix some grammar. No, copy editing is like a small portion of it, but we're not fixing the story. And then finally, proofreading, which is pretty self-explanatory. The proofreader is just catching all the little things that the editor missed.
So you've heard me mention this a lot of times. I know you agree with me on this, and that is editing, in my view, is the best investment that you can make, because if you put a crappy product out there, you only get one shot to make a first impression. And personally, I feel editing is the absolute best investment that you can make with your book.
I would agree with that. I mean, you need a pretty cover or no one's going to buy it. But once they buy it and your book sucks, then what? So yeah. And the process with my company is, like I said, we charge per round. Some editors do an all-encompassing package. From my experience, it's easier to just charge per round because we charge by the word. And if they pay for developmental editing and then the word count gets cut in half afterward, or it doubles, then we send out a new invoice. But it's usually, we work in Google Docs or Word. Suggested edits are put in so the author can give feedback and respond to things. It's a simple process once you get it, but for some first timers who don't understand anything about the editing process, it can be really daunting. And the main problem we have is that people give me a timeline and say, I need this published by a certain time. They hire me for one round, and then they keep the book for months after one round. And then they get it back to me and expect me to have it done in a day. And they're like, well, you said you'd meet this deadline. I'm like, well, you kept the book for months, and I would have met the deadline if you had gotten it back to me in 3 days, but it just took longer. And so I don't like to rush the person to do the edits. So that's something I've noticed can cause contention and like subpar work, is the author speeding through resolving the edits and just not doing a thorough job. So now, like, I have a timeline for each round. Is like, our company, we average 30,000 words per week per round. So if you have a 30,000 word book, expect each round to take a week. However long you take to get it back to me does not count. It'll be probably another week. And that's only average. I actually don't do deadlines anymore. And I probably won't ever again. I don't accept deadlines. So
completely understandable. And one thing I wanted to ask, because I know our audience is probably thinking about this right now. So, well, what type of books do you edit? So fiction, nonfiction, what type of book specifically does your company edit? And then do you have people assigned for specific areas?
Yeah, we take anything and everything. But yes, we have different specialists in different areas. My specialization is business, medical, but like, that's where most of my training is. I now have a lot of experience with self-help, just because not only do I read it a lot, but that's the majority of what we get, is like spirituality and self-help. Even though I prefer business books, honestly. Medical books are cool too, just because I'm good at them. But fiction is my favorite to edit. We just don't get a lot of fiction, specifically because most fiction authors, this is sad to say, but most fiction authors can't afford a real editor. Like, it sounds harsh, but it's true. If you think about it, a typical fiction book can be like 100,000 words or more. And especially if you need to do multiple rounds, which a lot of them do, like, you're getting in thousands and thousands of dollars, and that's just not feasible for a fiction author, because what makes fiction authors their money back is by pumping out content, multiple books. So a lot of fiction authors' best bets are to like get a cheap beta reader off of Fiverr, have a bunch of friends read it, and then find usually a non-US based editor who still understands US English to do like a content edit, and then maybe they'll hire a proofreader, but oftentimes they don't. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the standards for fiction books in self-publishing are a lot lower than nonfiction. It's just a sad fact. But I do always encourage every fiction author to invest in top of the line editing for their first book. Yes, you're probably spending thousands. Yes, that's painful, but you're going to be such a better writer because of it if you pay attention to those edits.
Absolutely. Trust the process, take the lessons you learned and apply them to your future books. So let's take the editing hat off and put on the author hat. So tell us about some of the books that you have gotten out there and published under your own name. So what types of books, some of the names, and just tell us a little bit about that journey.
Well, let's see. I published my first one in 2017. That was Yoga for You, and that's the one I kind of threw together really quickly. It was actually because my dad had found out he only had 3 months left to live, and his like dying wish was to hold my book. Like, okay, so I rushed and got that book done. It was subpar. I went back and fixed it later. However, it did really well. It made me a lot of money. Like, it did really well. And then I put out the next book, which was Overcoming Chronic Pain Through Yoga. And that was just so niche specific that it, to this day, is selling very well. I mean, it's selling at least 10 copies a day still. And it's been almost 4 years. So that was a good investment. And I used everything I learned on the first book to apply to the second one. I spent probably $10,000 publishing that first book. I spent maybe $500 publishing that second book. And that second book is still making me more money to this day. After that, because that was nonfiction, I've put out a memoir. I have a couple business books on the way. I have a bunch of books about sexual empowerment coming out, because that's actually something I do with coaching clients. Is I wear a lot of hats. So I have like sex coaching and business coaching and editing and writing, but my biggest passion are my fiction books. And I have several fiction series. Right now they're all young adult. My daughter's also a published author, and she and I are co-authoring a series that we just put out book 2 in. So right now it's all young adults. I do have more adult stuff coming out, but I'm kind of easing into the waters because right now I do have a fairly younger audience for my fiction. So I think as I put out the more adult stuff, that's going to come under another pen name, just so that I don't have a bunch of parents mad at me. So, yeah.
Excellent. Let's talk a little bit about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launches that has worked well.
Launch teams. That's really, every marketing strategy is going to be different. And like, I could go into like setting up a chart for which launches and book promo sites and things. But honestly, just like having a solid launch team that's in your genre is crucial. Because I mean, my first book, I kind of had that sob story though of like, hey, my dad's dying. I have to get this book out there and he wants to see it a bestseller. So I had a lot of people. I had like 500 people on my first launch team because they all wanted to support me, and they did. Like, it skyrocketed that book. The book did really well for like a few months, and then sales just dropped. So even though that was effective, that really only works once. After that, you have to have loyal fans. So I have that's kind of the problem, is I have like my loyal fans for my nonfiction, and then I have my fiction readers. And I just utilize the same launch team. I try to remember to post about it a lot on social media, but mostly I have like my readers who, as long as I remind them, I know will buy the book when it's fresh and cheap, and then leave reviews. And just getting those reviews up there to get it up in the rankings at the beginning is just the most effective strategy, because after you get it up in the rankings, you can start running ads, and the ads are way more likely to work if you've already gotten yourself up in the rankings. You can't really run ads. You can't really run ads to a dead book. And I don't know what just happened there. So you have to keep it up there, and it's really hard to stay up in the rankings unless you're running ads. So the idea is like, do the push, get up in the rankings, run the ads to keep it there.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
So my favorite book, that one's easy. I'm just trying to figure out how to really state it, but we'll go with the subtle art of not giving a frick, but since it has the F word in the title, but I know I can't say that on here, but by Mark Manson, my favorite book of all time. I've probably read it 5 times. It's up there with like The One Thing and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Those are like probably my 3 favorite books, but in the business world anyway. But The Subtle Art is just so much more than just a business book. As far as what I've learned from it, it's really that when you take on too much, you're just going to burn out. And I had a stroke because I burned myself out. So like, sometimes you just have to not care Like, I piss people off all the time. And at this point, like, you know, I am who I am, and I actually really like the way I am. And so I don't need to make changes because other people tell me I have to do it this way. Like, I used to be really obsessed with having mentors, someone who did it this way to tell me how to do it now. And I've come far enough in my career that I don't really do the mentor thing anymore. I still have, I mean, I guess you could say people mentor me, but it's not the same as it used to be. When I was new, I don't regret doing it. If you're new in the business, having a mentor is wonderful. But there is a plateau where you do need to figure it out yourself. And and so by tuning out all the static and the noise and all the naysayers and just doing what works for you, even if it's weird, that's okay, because who cares what anyone else thinks.
I think you just mentioned the best selling point of working with yourself, because the main thing is this: you know what you're going to get, and if you don't like it, it's not a fit. But if it is a fit, then you've probably got a client for life. Because I'm the same way with my clients. When we're having that initial phone call, I'm like, listen, I'm going to be direct with you about your book, because my job is to make sure that you have the best product. I don't sugarcoat. So there's things that, you know, these areas of opportunity, that's going to be done. It's the same thing when I'm doing events. I'm very direct and to the point. And, you know, you always hear that, you know, when you meet 100 people, you know, what's the percentage? You know, 80 out of 100 people may love you, but 20 are going to hate you. I'm a 90-10, where 90% do, but 10% are going to hate me with everything they have. And I'm cool with that. I don't play the whole perception is reality game, right? Someone likes me, great. If they don't, tough. They're not in my life, so I don't care. You know, I had the philosophy, get rid of toxicity 15 years ago. My best friend used to refer to this as my SHI, you can add the T to it, list, because that's what happened. You got to a certain point, that was it. You don't exist in my life. And I have that same philosophy with business. People, if they vibe with you, they vibe with you. And if they don't, then hey, best of luck to them. But why should you change who you are? Because when I learned that lesson, my life totally changed.
Oh, I completely agree. And even to this day, like, I still have, I guess, someone who's kind of in a mentor position, but more of a friend. I think he tries to be more I think it's more him trying to be my mentor rather than my allowing it. But even though we do vibe, there's still things that he tries to change about me. And I mean, there's also an age difference. So like, he's like 15 years older than me. So I've noticed he kind of tries to daddy me, and like, you know, it took me years, because we've been working together for years and years now. And finally I was like, yeah, I don't actually need to listen to you anymore. I'm good, but thanks for your input. Just don't do it anymore. Like, I don't want it anymore. And everything shifted after that. So but it took me a long time to get there. If I respected the person, I used to take their advice way too seriously. I never really took everyone's advice seriously. I used to think that I never really cared what other people thought, but it turned out there were certain people I did. And just because I didn't care about anyone else, it was like, well, these other people, what they think is important to me because I respect them. Well, just because you respect someone doesn't mean that they necessarily have the best advice for you. So you have to filter it and use your own discernment to decide if that's actually something that you want to take into account.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the mentor is to guide you, not to tell you what to do or how to live your life. Because I had a problem with the mentor. They try to get a little bit too much about what I should be doing. And I'm like, listen, that's not going to be the right fit. You understand, I'm a certain way with things, and I've got a stubborn streak the size of Texas where nobody owns me. And I'm very clear about that. I'm like, you know, advice is great, support, you're my friend, but you're not going to change my life in that direction. I have my own life. But your guidance and your support is greatly appreciated, as is your friendship, but don't try to change me. It's not going to work.
Agreed.
So favorite quote and why?
So my favorite quote is actually a skydiving quote. Well, there's a few skydiving quotes, but that's because I'm a skydiver. So, so when I did my first solo jump, I don't remember what year that was now, but I was on my way up, and I have it written down right here, actually. Adventure may hurt you, but monotony will kill you. Because we were talking about, you know what, like this weird thing that we do. We jump out of planes for fun. There's no point really. And there's a lot of injuries. I've hurt myself so many times skydiving over the years, 16 years now of just craziness. And so, but yeah, adventure may hurt you. It's true. But yeah, monotony will kill you. And I think the same thing goes in the business world and in the author world. It might be a little scary to put yourself out there. You're going to get some bad reviews. You're going to get some haters. Honestly, if you're doing it right, you're going to get that. If you don't have any bad reviews on your book, no one's going to take your book seriously, because that means like only your mom's knitting group read it. But so there's going to be bad reviews. Celebrate your first bad review. But it's true. If you just stay in your comfort zone and don't step outside, it'll kill you eventually.
I look at the first bad review as a badge of honor. I get them on every book. I mean, we mainly get great reviews, but I think it's a badge of honor, and it shows your book is legit. You just didn't utilize your friends, your family, your mom, your dad, your dog, whoever. You're utilizing, people, they didn't like your book. So that's awesome, because that is your badge of honor. You have officially become an author. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well, Kat, really enjoyed having you on. This has been an awesome conversation. What is the best way for people to find you online and to find out more about your editing services?
You can check out my website, wanderingwordsmedia.com.
Awesome. Well, Kat, thank you once again for being on our show, and I wish you all the best in your author and editing journey ahead.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.